What's happening? Welcome back. That's official.
Yeah, you better.
Yes, this is such a fucking procrastination project, this podcast. I used to do Instagram stories like every single day. Like every single day. And I did it for like, I don't know, I think it was 3 years without missing a day. And it was filmed, edited, it had music and stuff in it. And it was from like when Instagram stories first launched. And I loved doing Instagram stories because they disappear. So you could like try different stuff. And the risk was it would only be up for 24 hours. A select group of people would see it and it would disappear off the internet. Um, and I love doing that. And I remember my buddy Ryan asking me one day, how can you be bothered doing these every single day? And I said, if I don't do it every single day, I'll never do it. I need that consistency, that know that not that like expectation from myself and also the perceived audience that Dylan's going to put a video up. Because it sounds silly, right? Because I don't have a huge following on Instagram, but I used to get people who would message me if I hadn't uploaded like during the day, because maybe I'd banked my story and I was going to upload at night, and they would message like at like 8 9 p.m. and be like, everything okay, bro? I'll be like, yeah, I'm fine. Why? And they were like, it's just you haven't put a story up today. And I was like, I didn't realize you were waiting for it. And they were like, people were, and it's not because it was amazing. I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet. It's just that it's like familiarity. People get used to that. They get used to the idea of buying into a character or a story, and they get invested in it. Same reason we all binge watch TV shows. It's that kind of thing. And I remember when my buddy Ryan said that, I was like, well, if I didn't do it, I would never do it. And then one day, I stopped and I was like, I just can't be bothered. And I kind of felt like I was going to take a break for a couple of weeks and then come back at it. And I did. I took a break and I came back for 4 or 5 days. Then I took another break and then came back for another 4 or 5 days and then took another break. And then it just dwindled out and I stopped doing Instagram stories every single day. And I constantly toy with the idea of being like, I should just do it again. And every now and then I have a go, a little rattle at it. And then before I know it, life gets in the way. And today was a classic example because I had client meetings today and I'd scheduled them for the same day. They're in the same part of town in Belfast. I thought I'll smash the first one out at 10 a.m., get that done, get a little bit of a coffee break, catch up on a few emails, and then I'll bounce into the next one. And then the second one got pushed to later in the day. And I thought, all right, fine, that's all right. I got a big chunk of time. So I walked out of the house and I said to my wife, I'll hit this first meeting up and then I'm going to go shoot a vlog or something in Belfast while I'm there. That was the most optimistic thing I could have said, because do you know what didn't come out of my bag? The camera, until this podcast right now. Just didn't take it out because life got in the fucking way. Again, shit got in the way and stopped me from doing it. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it did stop me from doing the thing that I wanted to do. And it got me sort of thinking a little bit about like the way I used to create those Instagram stories. And I was thinking like, how the hell could I have done that? Like, how was I able to do that every day? There was quite a bit into it. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, it's just an Instagram story. It wasn't just like posting to Instagram. That wasn't really, that was the end product, obviously. But the concept behind it was I was building a story every single day. Every little story had its own style, its own approach, its own narrative, story arc, whatever the hell you want to call it. But what was mad when I look back at those days and I think about that was the amount of mental commitment that you have to, like mental investment that you have to have into doing something like that. Because it sounds so silly, but I would have got up every day and my head would have been thinking, I need to do the Instagram story. So my day would always be sort of subconsciously leaning into an Instagram story, which is mad, isn't it? When you think about that, because it totally engulfs you, totally absorbs everything about what you're doing. And it doesn't mean I wasn't conscious and like living my life, because I definitely didn't like do, well, maybe I did. I was gonna say I definitely didn't do stuff just for Instagram, but I definitely did. But I feel like that had a very positive impact on what I did, because if you know me, and you'll see with this podcast, like I swear, and I can be quite a miserable git at times. And I know people who know me will be going, yep, all facts. And I always describe myself as a pessimistic optimist. So like the general outlook on life is optimistic, but sometimes I just get through life. I'll get through the day to day being quite pessimistic. But I also like that. I find it kind of funny. There's a pessimism in my humor is kind of what I find entertaining. And what I liked about doing Instagram stories was really early on, there was a lot of families that were following along on the story and were chatting to me on Instagram all the time. And that made me very aware of what I was saying. And look, it wasn't a lot of people, but it was a handful of people. And there's enough in that handful of people to convince you to do something or steer you, because most of us don't really get a huge audience in life when we do anything. So you get a couple of people telling you something, it's going to sway your decision. And it makes me think, like I used to have a boss years ago called Michael, and we were sitting in a creative brainstorm meeting one day, and people were throwing ideas out, and then someone threw this like weird idea about fucking headless chickens running about, and it was like such a good sale. She knows exactly who she is if she ever listens to this. And then somebody else was like, yeah, that's great. And then we could do this. And then they started adding in. And then these two people were like throwing these thoughts around in this meeting. Meanwhile, the rest of us were looking at each other just like, what the fuck is going on? What are they on about? Like, what has this got to do with anything? And then he said, I'm just going to stop this right now, because before we know it, this will be happening, because it only takes two people to agree to make a shit idea go into production. That's what he said. And that stuck with me forever. And the amount of times I've regurgitated that sentence, if you see it happen, someone throws out something shit and then somebody else agrees, before you know it, that person's the way of doing it. Now, that also means that if you take the word shit out of it, it only takes two people to agree to make something go into production. Things happen when a couple of people agree. So if you imagine that you're sitting there and you're doing something and someone jumps into your DMs, you get 2 or 3 people. Just be like, hey, I love it when you do this. I really like the style of that. And before you know it, you've like veered your entire course to what they want. And that can be negative, but it can also be quite positive. And for me, it had a nice positive approach, because I had this group of people who were like, hey, I love watching your Instagram stories. I watch them every night with our kids or something silly like that. Or like me and my wife watch it. Or like there was maybe people who were quite religious who would message me and quite like the stories I was telling of Belfast. So I was very conscientious when shooting stuff that I had to be a little bit more, I guess, PC, which I argue a lot with now, but it didn't silence the way I spoke, but it made me be a little bit more thoughtful, a bit more optimistic in the way that I did stuff. And actually what it made me do is start to look at things and explore stuff in a way that put me way out of my comfort zone. Like I'll walk out and I'll be like, I'm going to go shoot a video here, and I'll pull the camera out in the fucking Gorilla Pod or whatever rig you're using. I'll pull out, I'll go to speak, and it'll take like one small speed bump, one small hiccup in the plan, one person to go, you dickhead, think you're cool with your camera, mate? And then I'm like, fuck this, put it in my bag, and I'm away home. I'm done. I'm like, fuck making videos, and I'll leave. So when I was doing this in Belfast, and I had like, I felt really awkward about shooting a video in the city centre, or someone says something to me, is some comment they pass as I walk past them, I would be like, I'd have to like suck it up and be like, just take a breath, think about the positive approach, and find a solution to it. And I was doing this day in and day out. Every day I was getting a train from Bangor to Belfast, and I was walking to work, and I was shooting on my lunchtime, and I had to try to find ways, first off, to combat the total fear of shooting content in public, which is petrifying. And then I had to learn how to get my personality across, I guess, in a fun way, but in an authentic way as well, which is very, very tricky to get right. And I used to get asked all the time, like, how do you shoot videos walking around in public? And I always shot on the main lens on a phone. So, like, which people, I mean, maybe more people do it now, but there wasn't a lot of people doing it back then. And it would always have been camera flipped in my hand, so I can't see the screen. So the reason I do that is I don't like looking at the screen. We discussed this in the last episode. So I prefer to look at the lens of the camera. So in doing that, I just talk to the lens of the camera. But the weird thing about that is at the other side is this fucking full-size screen, and you're walking down the street and people are looking at you like, what is this dickhead doing, chatting away at his phone? And this was like, I don't know, I can't remember what year this was, 2017 maybe, 2018. There wasn't a lot of people rocking about Belfast shooting videos of themselves back then. So you would have got a lot of looks, but you also kind of got away with it a bit because people weren't really used to it in the first year of it. But man, I used to walk around the city and try to find ways to shoot content of myself talking, and it was fucking difficult because I wanted to put the phone down, like have a sequence in. I didn't want to just be walking around rambling, which I guess I did a lot of because I've had people say, all you do is fucking talk shit. And I'm like, you don't have to watch it though. But I would like to like set the scene. So I'm like, if I'm going to be in an area, maybe I'm going to be in St. Anne's like area around the cathedral. I want to make sure there's a scene setter so you know, okay, that's where he is. And then boom, a bit where I enter the scene, and then a bit where maybe something happens, something for us to overcome in the story. I'll pick the camera up and I'll explain to you what we're doing or what I'm doing and it could be anything. I could have been out taking photographs. It all started focused around photography, and then it ended up with me like, going to the butcher's to get steak for dinner. And that's started to become quite fun to make that sort of more realistic stuff. But I used to set the camera up and then I would just stand off camera, shitting the brick for like sometimes 3-4 minutes, just waiting for people to walk away, just to wait till people were gone. And I would sort of have the camera like kneel down the ground. No one would see it. And I would just be like really, really awkward, really uncomfortable. And then when they were gone, I'd be like, wait for my minute. And I'd be, this is it. And this is my moment now. And I'll drop down. I'll walk in. I'll walk up to the camera and be like, all right, what's happening? Welcome back. And then it would be like that. You'd only see that like five seconds of like, God, he's comfortable on camera. But everything around that, nervous wreck. It took a couple of years of doing that to become truly confident in just walking through the middle of Belfast. And I'm telling you, I tried to vlog recently walking through Belfast, and it was fucking hard work. It's definitely hard on a camera. It's way easier doing it on a phone because it's a little less like noticeable. It's a bit more discreet, but also there's a lot more people now filming and talking to cameras and doing stuff. So I feel like Belfast has got used to it, because even back then, if I'd gone to London, no one would give a shit. People have got stuff to do. They're busy. Whereas Belfast, there's a lot of just meandering around. And the whole of Northern Ireland, to be honest, there's a lot of meandering around. So people are like very aware as to what other people are doing, which made it 10 times harder. But I would be like walking down some of the busy streets, and there'd be people going past. And people used to say to me, how do you just pull the camera out and film yourself? And I'm like, well, I don't. I walk down that street with the phone in my hand on camera mode, and I assess everyone in that road, and I make an educated decision based on what everyone's doing. So I'm like, how old is that man? What direction is he walking? Does he look like he's interested in what other people are doing? Is he going to say something to me? What about that group of kids? They're definitely going to hurl abuse at me. Those two guys in the tracksuits are definitely going to walk behind me and give me the fucking finger in the video. I don't want to look like an idiot in front of those group of girls. This person's going to ignore me. That's an age demographic that are not interested in what I'm doing. And I would wait and I'd wait and I'd wait. As the people who were maybe I'd be shitting a brick about passed, that's when the camera would go up. Boom. I'd say my sentence very, very quickly, and then the camera would drop down. And it became a strategy that worked really, really well. Just looking around and assessing your surroundings and working out, this is when I'm going to say it. But to be able to do that, you also have to be happy with the idea that sometimes you won't get the shot where you need it, and then you just have to work it out and go, I'm just going to have to do it around the corner. For a large part of the stuff, it doesn't really matter. There are times where I've had to come back and be like, for fuck's sake, I had to do a loop and come back around and go through the whole process again to try and get it. The more you do it, the more comfortable you get, and you get to the point where you're like, just if I can do it in front of everybody. And now, generally, I'm okay. If I'm walking with my phone through a group of people, I can pull the phone out and do a story pretty easily. However, the first couple of times is always a bit tricky. Like if I walked somewhere and pulled my phone to do a story, I would feel really, really rusty, a little bit like, that practice makes perfect. We apply practice to everything in life. But when it comes to this sort of stuff, we don't think about it as practice. So I definitely am rusty in doing it in public, but I feel a lot more confident doing it with my phone. But it took me ages to learn that and understand how to vlog in public. So yeah, that sort of became what I did all the time. So when I would get up, I'd be thinking about the story of the day. Now, sometimes I would just be like, what do I need to do to bring all these parts, these different elements together into one cohesive story for the day? And then there were other times where I was like, oh, I have nothing to do today, so I'm going to create a story. I'm going to go out and find something to do. And that is where this became a very positive thing for me. Those days where I was feeling a bit demotivated, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I wasn't really up for anything. And then I'd be like, oh, I've got to do the story. I have to make this Instagram story. So I have to go do something. And that would mean like I might just get up myself, drive down to Bangor, to the marina, and go, I'm just going to go shoot some photographs of the boats, as dull as that sounds. And then I'd always manage to just pull a small narrative story out of that. Because when you're thinking, these videos were no longer than 5 minutes, but they were scattered across Instagram stories. And back then, Instagram stories could only be 15 seconds per story. So you can imagine, people used to joke, they'd be like, oh my God, Dylan's put another perforated line up, because at the top of Instagram would just be these dots, like loads of little dots. Like, Dylan's uploaded 800,000 stories for me to watch today. But what I really liked about the 15-second thing was people could skip through the story pretty quickly, which is shit sometimes because they miss really good bits, but they could skip through it and only miss small chunks, and they could pick up on a story. So if it was like, oh, he's doing this, I get the point, and you could skip through it. Whereas now, when you've got someone that uploads a story that's a minute, if you do skip, you miss a large portion of what they're trying to get at. So I actually prefer, sometimes I'll actually cut my individual story down into like 30-second clips so that it's shorter for that exact reason. But at the same time, people don't really use Instagram stories the same way. But it forced me to get up and go and do something. It forced me to go and make something. Every little day was like a small mini project. And I learned a lot about talking to camera. I learned a lot about shooting, editing. I learned a lot about culling, and also the control of what people don't know you don't have. What you don't have, people don't know you don't have. There's got to be a nicer way of saying that. But it's this idea that it's like, people are like, oh, but it would have been cool if we had that. Yeah, but it would have been, but you don't have it. And no one was expecting that, because no one was expecting you to make this video today about peanut butter. But you've decided to make the video about peanut butter. So what you've got is all that they ever know you were going to get. So I started to learn this idea, like, fuck it. If I missed something, or if I couldn't make something work, I'd just be like, fuck it, can it, and just carry on. Find another way around it. So it improved my problem solving a hell of a lot. It allowed me to think and move fast, think on the go and move really fast, which sort of ties into a lot of the way that I shoot and make everything that I do. So there was a really positive side to that. Like, in making Instagram stories every single day made me explore my local area. It made me go out and create and make something every day. And then because of the audience of people that I got to know, I had to like hold back myself from swearing and complaining for the most part, which was key. And as silly as it is, it actually was a huge thing for me, like a mental shift in approaching stuff, because naturally, like, I could make a complaining channel so easily. Like, in fact, either one of these videos or one of these podcasts I had put up, and I did a rant on something. What the hell was it about? I can't remember. It was a few episodes back. I did a rant on something, and a good friend of mine, Matt, messaged me, and he watched it, and he was like, the whole way through this, I felt like I was just waiting for you to go off on one of your Dylan rants where you just fucking lose your mind and just go mental. And I was really waiting for it, and you never got there. And I was like, I know, because I hold it back so much, which is so hard to do, especially when you live in a world of content creation and people are like, oh, you got to be yourself, be authentic, all this sort of stuff. And that's true to a point. Authenticity is what sells you stories, but you've got to understand as well what you do when you make those decisions. Because I honestly could. There's a guy called Jackmate, if you've ever seen his content, like, hilarious, so funny. And I always watch him being like, I could, like, if I just let loose, that's what my content would end up being. But the problem is how that affects you and where that makes you go. And a good example of this is Russell Brand. I've watched his stuff for years. I've listened to his podcast for years. He's just always been this really interesting character. And when he started doing his own YouTube channel, like around the pandemic sort of time, I thought this is so interesting. You're getting the scope into a whole bunch of stuff that no one's talking about. And he's doing it in a very Russell Brandy way. He's picking very, very serious topics and he's talking about it in a jokey manner, which is fucking great. I love that. And I would have watched a ton of his videos, really, really enjoyed it. But if you watch his stuff now, which I do infrequently, what you notice with him now is the more he's talked about the state of the world and the topics that he discusses, he's talking about very negative stuff. So he's getting stuck in that funnel where people are like agreeing with what he's saying and fueling his fire, and he goes down that direction of, I don't even think you notice it happening. You just sort of start doing it, and before you know it, your direction sort of shifts a little bit. And he's started slowly to follow that. And the more he's followed that, and the more he started to discuss these negative topics and feed into this thing, this need that people want for this negativity, the more sort of negative and cynical he's become. So when you tune in and you watch one of his videos now, yeah, he's still covering the same topics. He's still talking about conspiracies. He's still talking about mad shit that's kind of interesting and weird. But I feel like that little flame inside him has like died a bit. Like it lacks that funny side, that entertaining, clever, like, I know something you don't, and I'm going to spin this in a way that's entertaining. So he would get across something very serious and put it into a very, very humorous way, but an intelligent humor way. And I just feel like when you watch his stuff now, it lacks that, man. It's just it feels like the more he's sucked into that and the more he's talked about that stuff, the more it's affected him subconsciously and deep down. So all his stuff feels very negative now. So I struggle watching his stuff now, and I'm like, oh, where was that little bit of humor? That little bit of, but then again, I'm just an audience asking him to do something. And if there was more of me asking that, he'd probably fucking go down the jokey route. So yeah, all that stuff has an effect on the way you do stuff. So when my buddy Matt was like, I was just waiting for you to go on a rant, I was like, yeah, I would love to just go on a rant. The problem is, where does it stop? Like, I'll go on a rant and then I'll just call everyone a cunt. And that'll be that done. Not really meant it, just thought it was fucking hilarious. Because I think I was brought up in a very observational household where you saw a lot and you spoke about what you saw. Look at that person doing this. So a lot of the way I do things is very observational. And the problem with that is you do go down the wrong route. You will just call everyone a dickhead. And that's just the way it is. So I'm like, yeah, no, I know you want me to do that. And I'm happy to go down that route if you and me are having a beer. But when it comes to the internet, I just need to rein it back in again, because you've got to think, like, once you unleash that, you can't get that back. You just fucking, that's you. You've gone down that. And the podcast I used to do with my buddy Ryan, the Over and Out show, was hilarious. It was a bit unhinged at times, and the two of us just went off on these random ass rants about total nonsense. And that podcast was hilarious. No one listened to it, which made it even better, because it was just Ryan and I effectively making a podcast for ourselves and like two guys, Sam and Ian, if they listened to it. Like, it was like just them. They were always commenting to us about it. So it was quite entertaining. But even that, just knowing that those two guys were watching it, there were other people watching it, but Sam and Ian, they were commenting and asking questions. I always felt like I was like, this is for the two of them. And eventually we were at the point where like, I can't be fucked. This is far too much work. But doing the Instagram stories made me a bit more positive in my approach to doing stuff. It made me look at stuff a little bit differently than I suppose the way I naturally would. I learned a lot about that stuff, met a lot of good people from it. It was just that doing it every day made me feel accountable to other people and myself. There was this expectation I was going to do it. It's one thing that people do struggle with, like this idea of frequency. And I think the hardest thing is you sit down, you can talk yourself in and out of ideas. I mean, I am so wild for talking myself in and out of ideas. And this podcast, like I've said before, I was like, I need to record a podcast. So what are you gonna talk about? I'm like, I don't know. I just want to sit down and talk about shit that's on my mind. So if I didn't just come here now and sit down and record this podcast, you know what'll happen? If I don't do this, because I'm like, oh, what are we gonna talk about? How deep can we go into it? What'll happen is I'll do it tomorrow. And then I'll not do it tomorrow. And then it'll be Thursday and I wouldn't have posted the fucking podcast. And then I'd be like, well, if I missed that week, I might as well just miss next week. Who cares? And then we've shit the bed and there's no fucking podcast to put out. And I just like making this stuff. It gets my brain going. It gets my head thinking a bit. And what was beautiful about those Instagram stories is I was always trying something new. I was always thinking of a story or learning to explain stuff a different way. And the repetition of that taught me a lot, technically and mentally, taught me a hell of a lot. So I wanted to keep doing it. And the thing of like, when I go back to what I was saying about practice, I like talking in front of the camera and I like making podcasts. I like tinkering with the software and the cameras and the lights and the toys and that stuff. But I keep forgetting to do it. And the idea of the podcast and this whole entire Shoveit thing being a creative procrastination project is it's just a place for me to do what the fuck I want to do. And hopefully other people enjoy that. And if you do, great. If you don't, I'm just going to keep making a podcast that only I listen to. Because I do. I do actually listen to my own podcast back. And you know what's weird about that is like I listen to me back or I watch me back in a video as like a version of me. And I don't know if that's good or bad. But like my wife gets annoyed because I'll watch something I've done that I think's funny and I'll laugh. And she's like, I can't believe you just fucking laughed at yourself. And I'm like, yeah, but he's quite funny. And I answer it like that, thinking he's quite funny. He's me. I am he. Him. Same person. But I think because I have tried to structure it and deliver it in a way that is mildly entertaining, I watch it back from a consumer point of view. So I live both the creator and the consumer lifestyle. And I watch my own content that I've created for me. I created my content for me, the consumer. So me, the consumer, watches me, the creator, and laughs at myself. And that's where we've got to. And that right there, that me watching me is the accountability that I need to keep making more self-absorbed content on the internet where I do a podcast from me to me. Dear Dylan, here's another episode for your ear holes. So, you know, I don't know if that's helped anyone. If you're thinking of shooting content and you're thinking, oh, how often should I do it? Just fucking do it every day. But I suppose the main key takeaway is if you're in this industry and you're working in this sort of stuff and you're wanting to make content and maybe you're struggling thinking about ideas, you're like, I don't know what the fuck I should be posting. And I hate the thing of just being like, start anyway and work it out. But if you work in the industry, definitely start doing this sort of stuff and work it out as you go because it's practice, it's learning. And while it annoys me that everybody just fucking thinks they're a content creator now because they've got a phone and they've called themselves a creative director of their own fucking business where it's just a business of one. I'm pretty sure my LinkedIn says I'm a creative director, but that means something very different, which we'll get into in another topic, titles. But you know, if you're getting into the creative world or you've been working in it for a while and you're just feeling depleted as fuck because you're bored, then go and make that shit because you practice stuff for other things. If you play the flute, you would practice, but you wouldn't just rock up at the flute show. What would that be? Like I play cricket and I go to cricket practice twice a week. We play cricket. And then when I pitch up on the weekend, I'm still shit, even though I've practiced. So imagine how bad I would be if I hadn't gone to practice. So all of this stuff is just practice. Practice using your gear, practice talking to camera, practice shooting in public, practice editing, practice setting up your lights, practice every little element to hone in your craft. And more importantly, it's just really good fun. So there you go. Thanks for listening to this one. Catch everybody in the next episode.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
What do you think of this one, by the way? I really like the camera angle up a bit higher this time. This feels a bit more like me and a little... See when the camera's lower and it's like further back and it's sitting at like 35 to 50 mil, it's too far away. It feels weird. And when I watch it back, I've got a big fucking square head because of that that lens. I like the wide lenses. Makes my body look way thinner and my head look larger, but less square, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? I'm looking at myself there. Do I look less square? Definitely do. This is more me. This is more my style because you're right there and I can just, you know, I can touch you there if you want. So Anyway, that's what we're done. I'm gonna go home now. See you later.